How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jared Berenstein, and I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics, regardless of how complicated or simple they might be. I know that politics can be really hard to try to learn about when you're first getting started. It can feel like trying to learn a new language, and following politics these days is even more complicated because there's all this misinformation and propaganda out there. And so, this is the place where you can come and ask all of your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated they might be. No one's going to make fun of you. No one's going to tease you. Nobody's going to roast you. This is not a place for harassment or bullying. This is not a place for debating or owning people or getting owned. It is just good faith answers to all good faith questions. What's up, Concrete Poker? What is your question? Go ahead and ask at your leisure. Any questions? Everybody is welcome here. Republican, Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I am not here to judge you based on your political philosophy. I'm here to engage with you on your political philosophy. What's up, Triska? Great to see you. Happy New Year to you as well. And Happy New Year to everybody out there in streaming world. If you got any questions about politics on this, the first day of the first month of 2026, then go ahead and ask away. Let us have our New Year's resolution that we are going to be better informed and more involved in politics. Concrete Poker says, did the Democrats' lack of honesty lead us to Trump as president? I don't think so. I mean, the Democratic Party is statistically more honest than the Republican Party and way more honest than Donald Trump as an individual. And so if people were upset about a perceived lack of honesty in the Democratic Party, it doesn't really make sense that they would then vote for the more lying party and the most lying presidents, in recent history. Is there anything, Concrete Poker, that made you think that that might be the case? Like, where are you getting your news from that maybe created the impression that Democrats are less trustworthy or less honest than Republicans or Trump? Or was there a content creator that put that message out there? Because I'm really interested to hear where that narrative came from. So, yeah, excellent start to the day, everybody. Thank you for the compliments, Yolanda. I appreciate that. Any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and we will get to answering it. I know politics is really confusing. Concrete Poker says, what is a woman? Most Americans can answer that, Democrats can't. Oh, so you're not here in good faith, Concrete Poker. You are just here to malign people on the left and Democrats. Got it. Okay, cool. Spectre says, why did the U.S. strike Nigeria? I'm not 100% sure. I know that there's like a weird propaganda campaign that the Trump administration is perpetuating, basically saying that there's like a Christian genocide happening in Nigeria and that is somehow related to why we bombed them. But I don't know. I fail to see the value of it besides using it as a propaganda tool to make it seem like Christians are being persecuted around the globe. All right. Excellent first questions, everybody. Concrete Poker, just letting you know, we have a rule here that if you're not asking questions in good faith, then you get booted. So you say saying, I'm saying that that premise moved slot of people to the right, no hate. I mean, yeah, but it's a faulty premise, like people that are experts in the field of biology will tell you that sex and gender are very complicated and it's not so simple as, this person has a penis, this person has a vagina, or this person has a Y chromosome and this person doesn't. The people that ask that question and the people that claim that Democrats have an inability to answer what is a woman, like it's just straight trolling, isn't it? Concrete Poker, like, can you admit that is not the vibe of that question? Retirement planning specialist says, Iran, could this finally be the fall of the current regime? Potentially, I love when protest movements and regime change movements spring about organically from within the country. It's just when we go in and try to enforce our will on the population that things tend to turn into fucking quagmires. But yeah, I'm all for this. I'm happy to see that there's going to be some, I don't know, potential accountability and change in the theocracy. DDD Des says, "We are Charlie Kirk. We carry the flame." Well, is this a bit, DD? Let's see here. Mickey says, "Do you think it's okay for Minnesota to commit all that fraud?" Minnesota did not commit fraud. It was a white lady who's currently in jail, and it's not like Minnesota is the only place that has this kind of fraud. Like if you look up that program that was giving money for kids, that fraud existed in, Nevada and New Hampshire and Arizona and shit like that. The reason why it's in the news right now is because Republicans are trying to smear Tim Walz and Somali immigrants and Ilhan Omar, and it's all based on lies, basically. Let's see here. Lauren says, "You eluded me yesterday." What does that mean, Lauren? Good to see you again, as always, but I don't know what that means. Scottish Maoist says, "What is your ideology?" I am a progressive Democrat. Okay, Kinnair says, "It's a bit." Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, excellent question so far. Death Stage 4 says, "Would you collude with the CIA for Zootopia 3? No, I would not. DT, the OG, says, "So a commie Democrat." Do you see why that might not be a productive thing to bring to the conversation, DT? I told you I was a progressive. You're calling me a commie. Like, that's not what I said. It's clear that you're trying to use that terminology as a pejorative. So it's like, you can actually ask a question, be part of the conversation, hang around in good faith, or you can try to start fights and I'll boot you. Like, that's the way that this live goes. Lauren says, "You went live early when you know I'm always late." Well, you were there, though. I remember you being there. Okay, candidate for Leith says, "Who is Trump's real opposition?" There's a whole bunch of, people within the administration who seem kind of like secretly adversarial to Donald Trump. Various wings of the Republican Party, like the Nick Fuenteses of the world, are saying like, MAGA's dead, Trump sucks, blah blah blah. Other than that, I would say his main opposition is people that are, people that follow the news, because people that follow the news, the real news, not right wing news, they know what he's up to. They know that he is committing crimes and, impeachable offenses, and that he should 100% go. Okay, DT, the OG says, "Do you believe in wealth redistribution?" Yes. Okay, Ken Harris says, "Communists cannot be Democrats, as communism is functionally stateless and moneyless." I kind of agree with that, Ken Harris. The thing is, like, these words have different definitions depending on who you ask. So my friend DT, the OG, my guess is that he's asking me about wealth distribution because he thinks that is like evidence that I'm a communist. But again, like, that's not my definition of communism. I don't think that's I don't think that is most people's definition of communism. Max says, "Is healthcare a right or a privilege?" It is a right. Brando says, "How bad was Trump's first term?" As bad as it can be, you know. The difference between Trump's first term and this term is he was able to do more bad things in a shorter window of time in his second term than in his first term. Like, his first term would have been this bad if he had planned, if he was smarter, if he had, there weren't so many people who were not down with his agenda, both within his cabinet and in the Republican Party at large. So yeah, he would have been this bad in his first term if he was smarter, had planned ahead, and had filled, if the Republican Party was not so filled with loyalists at the time. Completely Lawless says, "Where is the right to healthcare defined?" I guess in our souls or in our hearts. If you abide by the golden rule of, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Like, can you imagine what it would be like to need surgery or need treatment or need medicine and not be able to afford it? Like, it's monstrous. And so we should organize a society where everybody has access to it, because not having access to it is barbaric and cruel. Scottish Maoist says, "Communism isn't up to interpretation. It's defined by Marx, Engels, and those who come after." Yeah, but there's a lot of wiggle room in there, Scottish Maoist. And also, depending on who you talk to, they have a different definition. So I think it is not productive to kind of like harp on these semantic differences. Like, what does this word mean? What does this word not mean? This guy's calling me a commie, which he is going to say means that I believe X, Y, and Z. I didn't call myself a commie, but I'm also going to say things like tax the rich, and he's going to say that means that you're communist. And also communism means dictatorship and Cuba and Venezuela and Russia. And it's like, that's not what I said, what I'm saying at all. Like, you're making all of these leaps in logic based on the definition of a word that I do not agree with. Okay, so that's why, we have to not be dogmatic about what these words mean. Because if you are, then you end up fighting about what the words mean as opposed to actually discussing politics and going after the real enemy, which is the billionaire class and the Republican Party. Okay, no, I'm with you, Scottish Maoist. DT the OG says, so from each to their ability, to each according to their need. Isn't that communism? Again, DT, by some people's definition. My definition of communism is the workers owning the means of production, which, could, by my definition, mean just a company that is owned by the employees, like Publix grocery stores or Bob's Red Mill. It could mean having the workers, giving the workers a seat at the board so that they have representation there, and it's not just the shareholders that are making the decisions. I believe in kind of a flexibility of that system because I like the idea of employee-owned businesses, and I like the idea of universal health care, So if it's like that's a little slice of socialism or that's a little slice of communism, sounds pretty good to me. Doesn't mean I'm on board with, turning America into Russia or Venezuela. But, I think maybe the system would work better if we encouraged companies to be employee owned or people were not, paying ungodly amounts of money for healthcare or not being able to afford it and dying, Okay, Ashel says, which Democratic candidate do you think those who are Republican or center can get behind? It's an interesting question, Ashel, because you have your sort of like more centrist candidates like your, Chuck Schumer's or your Hakeem Jeffries and stuff like that. Not saying that they would that they're running for president, but I'm just saying like them as an example of what a centrist is. And then you have your sort of like far left candidates, like your Bernie Sanderses and your AOCs and stuff like that. The problem is that centrists, who by all rationale would be the ones to appeal to more centrist or Republican voters, are missing the one policy that would make them attractive to that voters, and that is economic populism. Everybody, most people in America like the idea of economic populism that is being espoused by the people on the far left and being eschewed by the people in the center left. But if you ask Americans who their favorite politicians are, you ask Americans, like, would you vote for a Bernie Sanders or an AOC? They'll tell you, I don't know, I think they're too far to the left. But the thing that makes them too far to the left, based on, so-and-so's definition, is the fact that they want economic populism, meaning that they want to make, life easier for the 99%, take some money away from the billionaire class. So it's interesting. Being the far left means that they are politically not viable because the majority of America believes that the Democratic Party has gone too far to the left. So the party then thinks, okay, well, we'll nominate a centrist, but the centrist is missing the one policy that makes the Democratic Party, not the one policy that makes the Democratic Party attractive, the one policy that would make somebody in the center or somebody who's a Republican want to vote for a Democrat. It's a catch-22, and I think it's a purposeful catch-22. It's an inorganic catch-22. Like the people that have created these narratives around the Democratic Party are the ones that have created this, what do you call it? The knot that the Alexander the Great couldn't untie. It's just like an impossible puzzle to solve. Heads I win, tails you lose. So yeah, I don't think that we should really truck with these ideas of what makes a centrist and what makes a far left politician. I just think, hey, this person's for universal health care. This person's for taxing the rich. This person believes that climate change is real. This person believes we should do something about the rampant gun violence that we have here in America. Sounds pretty good to me. Whether you want to call it centrist or leftist or communist or socialist, those are the policies that I want. So, take that for what you will. Triska Muzzking, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. Okay, Ashel says, I was going to say Bashir. It is very funny for me to rant for 10 minutes based on your question, and then you're just like, "Oh, I just met Bashir." That really gave me a good tickle. But yeah, Bashir's great. I really do like Andy Bashir. Bashir's great. Yeah, there are a lot of. I think Democrats have a really good bench right now, and I know that people think that there's like no standout candidates or there's no specific Democrats that are wildly popular or appealing to the general public or some shit like that. But yeah, I think that the party behind any number of these candidates would be extremely popular. Ashel says, "LOL." That was in response to another comment. LOL. Well, the way that I interpreted it was very enjoyable. Candidate for Leith says the idea any U.S. Democrat is far left is absurd. I mean, again, candidate, it just depends on how you define these terms. I know that there's this like general idea that American Democrats are not as far to the left as like European conservatives, but I reject the premise. Like we have our AOCs, we have our Bernie Sanders is, and I'm sure that they are on par with the leftists in Europe. DET, the OG, says, why don't the Democrats raise taxes on the billionaires when they are in power? So that's a really good question, DT. And the answer is they do, but they just don't, they're never able to lower them by as much as the previous Republican had raised them. And the reason why is because Democrats often are dealing with a mixed government. Like if you look at in recent history, if you look at which president has had more congressional control, which party has had more congressional control and judicial control, making it easier for them to pass their agendas, the answer is overwhelmingly the Republican Party. They always have bigger margins in the Senate and the House, like of votes that they can lose. Their party is much more monolithic, so there are fewer defectors the way that we had people like Joe Lieberman and Kristen Sinema to deal with. So yeah, if you want to go like year by year or administration by administration, like I could suss out some of the details for you. But the largest mandate that the Democratic Party ever had was in 2008, and that only existed for 8 months. So they basically spent that entire time doing the Affordable Care Act, which flawed piece of legislation, but it was transformational, and there are people alive today because of it. So you can argue about whether or not that was a good use of Obama's capital at the time, but they did do something to take money away from the rich and make the lives better for poor people. Mike Green says, Jess, got on what time? Just got on what time did you start? 11:30, the same way I usually do. Oh, I usually start around 11:15. That's my secret cap is I say I'm going to start at 11:30, and I always start like around 5, 10, 15 minutes earlier, just to give myself a window to make sure I'm here on time. DT says, I would be 100% for a politician if they raise taxes on the 1%, if they lower taxes for under 100K. That's essentially the Democratic platform, DT. And individual Democrats might have different versions of what their ideal tax code might be, but that general principle, like the bird's eye view principle of what you just described of raising taxes on the 1% and lowering them for people under 100K, that is the Democratic platform. DT says, why haven't they done it? So again, they have done it, just not enough and not for long enough. Because again, people keep on voting for Republican politicians who, because they're so much more aligned than the Democratic Party, because they're a monolith as opposed to the Democratic Party being a coalition of a bunch of little groups, it's easier for them to get that agenda done, and they always go maximalist, and it's easier to break things than it is to fix things, so it's easier for them to get that job done. DT says, no, they haven't. I mean, they have. Would you like me to talk to you about specific policies that the Democratic Party has enabled and done in the past that are basically what you're saying, raising taxes on the wealthy and lowering them for everybody else, DT? Because I can give you specifics if you want. JT says, I want someone who strongly supports the blue-collar class. Again, that's the Democratic Party. DT says, so people making under 100K pay zero in taxes. No, I never said that, DT. But they have lowered taxes for the 99% and raised taxes on the 1%. We haven't gotten taxes down to zero for people that make under 100K, but they have moved the goalpost further in that direction than the Republican Party. So are you telling me that Democrats have to eliminate taxes for everybody under 100K, or you're not going to vote for them, which means that Republicans will get elected, and not only will they not do that also, but they'll go further in the opposite direction. They will raise taxes on people making under 100K and lower taxes for the top 1%. Do you really think that that's a better move? Do you really think it's a better move that we allow Republicans to cut taxes for the rich and raise taxes on everybody else just because Democrats aren't lowering taxes enough for the bottom 99% and not raising taxes enough on the top 1%? Maybe if we gave Democrats enough time and power, they would be able to get to no income tax for everybody under 100K and massively taxing the billionaire class. But we never give them enough power or time to actually achieve that agenda, because there are people out there who have this perfectionism insistence on the Democratic Party. I'm not going to vote for them unless they have been perfect their entire lives and they continue to be perfect going forward. If they don't have a policy that completely aligns with what I believe in a nation of 300 million people, they have to match my values very specifically, or I'm not going to vote for them. Seems a little unproductive. And I appreciate you saying Fairport, DT. I did see you acquiescing there. He says, will Trump ban broccoli? I have not seen any reporting to suggest that he might. Triska says, the illogical conservatives for literally every policy is why they vote against their best interests. I don't know how accurate that is, Triska, but, I get your meaning. We're on the same team. Coach Cam says, do you think they will ever close the loan loophole for billionaires? So, Coach, they will if we vote for the politicians who say that they're going to do that. And then if they don't do that, then we replace them with politicians who say that they are going to do that. The problem is that people keep on not voting for politicians who are going to close the loophole. And when I say that, that means Republicans. Because if we gave the government to the Democratic Party for enough time and we gave them enough seats, then 100% we can close those loopholes for billionaires. 100%. JT says, what's the loan loophole? I'm uninformed. So I think I know exactly which loophole Coach Cam is talking about, but generally speaking, the tax code is filled with loopholes so that billionaires, giant companies can avoid paying as much taxes as they can. Like you can write off your private jet and fuel for your private jet, and Walmart is allowed to pay their employees a starvation wage, and at the same time, those employees are going to need, like welfare, for example. And so we are paying for Walmart to not pay their employees a living wage. The specific loan loophole that I believe Coach Cam was referring to is that one of the ways that rich people are able to sort of rig the system in their favor is that they don't pay any income tax because they don't pay themselves an income based on their companies. All they do is they borrow money from a bank and then pay that loan back with whatever interest the bank is charging on that loan. Because these rich people have so much capital, because they have so much I forget the word for the thing that you have that means that your loan is secure. We have so many resources that they're able to borrow money against it at a much lower rate than the rest of us. And the way that sort of becomes this infinite money glitch is that because it's not income and it's a loan that they are paying back, they pay fewer or no taxes on that money that is coming to them. Collateral, thank you very much, Marty. I appreciate that. Gavin says, this ain't political, but roll tide. You're right, that is not political. Matt Lance says, so how is there a difference in left or right? There isn't. There is. Quickest example I can give you, Matt, is that there are people alive today because of the Affordable Care Act, which was created by the Democratic Party. And there are women who are dead today because of abortion bans that were created by the Republican Party. So to all of the people who are alive because of the Affordable Care Act or dead because of abortion bans or currently sitting in ICE detention facilities or in a concentration camp in El Salvador, all of these people will tell you that there is a massive difference between the political parties. Let's see here. Matt Lance says they all went to the same Ivy League schools. Okay, well that doesn't really, discredit the thing that I said, Matt. What do you think about the thing that I said? Gavin says, does the president control gas prices, or like can he change it? The president doesn't control gas prices, but there are things that a president could potentially do to hypothetically bring down the cost of gas. For example, the Trump administration at the end of 2020 made a deal with all of these oil producing companies to basically say, we are going to limit production while everybody is in their houses during COVID so that gas does not become so inexpensive that it is no longer profitable to create it. It was a way of sort of like buoying the market. But then that deal lasted until 2022, which meant that gas prices started skyrocketing during the Biden administration because of that deal that, Trump made. Depending on if we kiss the asses of the Saudi royalty, they could potentially jack up or lower our gas prices. So it's like, it's complicated. It has a lot to do with production and international politics and, things of that nature, subsidies, etc. But it's not like a switch that they can flip, it's difficult in order to do that, Jay says, do you consider yourself a leftist or on the left? I call myself a progressive Democrat. Some people might describe that as a leftist. I'm sure that some people might describe that as a communist or a socialist, or, I'm sure that there are some democratic socialists out there who hear me calling myself a progressive Democrat and go, oh, you're a centrist, you're a Hakeem Jeffries type. That's why I don't really truck with these definitions. If you want to know what my political philosophies are, like just ask me for the policies and I'll let you know. And then you can slot me into whatever definition you would prefer. Candidate says, what does host think will end the Trump presidency? That's a really good question, candidate. So obviously he is old and his health is not great. So it's possible that he just passes away at some time in the near future. The most likely scenario is that he tries to stay in office at the end of 2028 and he fails. So that's either, rigging the elections in 28, canceling the elections in 28, declaring martial law, sending the National Guard into blue districts and trying to burn their ballot boxes or shit like that. And failing to do that, because America will vote him out of office in 28, whether it is because he's not allowed to run for another term or because he is wildly unpopular, like one of those two things. So yeah, that's the most likely scenario, but it's really important to recognize that he's going to try to stay, or he's going to try to rig the system. Like, his only two options for staying out of jail are staying president or making sure that the Republican that replaces him pardons him for all of his crimes. Alrighty, let's see here. Lady Lisa says, do you think Kristi Noem will go to prison? I mean, she definitely deserves to go to prison. Whether that actually happens has to do with how much work you and I do. Like, how powerful can we make the wing of the Democratic Party that prioritizes accountability for people in the Trump administration? That is work that we can achieve if we do it. We just have to do it. And so if we just, hope and pray that, Democrats win elections and the very specific Democrats who have the stones to actually demand that kind of accountability get elected, or we can actually do work to try to ensure that that happens. And Triska, Pink Love, and Candidate, thank you so much for helping me reach, I believe that was my second gift goal of the day. Fletch Lives Again says, Trump can't pardon himself? Question mark. I know that this was a talking point during the first administration. I don't know where we landed, legally, whether or not that's something that he would be able to accomplish. It seems like if he could have done it, he would have done it during his first term. It seems like if he could be doing that now to prepare for potential accountability going forward, he would have done it already. I don't put it past him to do that as kind of like a Hail Mary as he's leaving, in 28. But yeah, he has a lot of legal cover already, thanks to certain Supreme Court decisions, and thanks to him being extremely wealthy and having a lot of powerful friends. So, um, yeah, it is one of many options that he has to skirt accountability. That's one of the problems with the systems that we have. Okay, P1 says, do you believe Pam Bondi loses her license to practice law after this administration is out? Again, that's an open question. She deserves to, but, if the people in charge of that decision or the people that can influence those people are people that are on her team, then she will escape accountability. Again, it's up to us. The government is who we vote for and who we convince other people to vote for. So we need to replace the people in government right now who are shielding these criminals, who are allowing Trump to have a crypto coin and accept jets from Qatari royals in exchange for promising them the free use of the American military. So long as we keep on voting for people who allow the Trump administration to remain as lawless and corrupt as they are, then there won't be accountability. We have to replace those people with people that will insist on accountability. Triska says, is Trump immune from prosecution even after he leaves office? So it's a little complicated, Triska, because there was a Supreme Court decision that says that presidents are immune from things that they do in office so long as they are quote unquote official acts. So, and what is an official act? That is something that the Supreme Court gets to decide on a case by case basis. So anything that Trump does, anything that Trump, when he leaves office, he could be legally accountable for, he gets to make a case to this extremely right-wing Supreme Court, of which he sat 3 of the members, and they now owe him, potentially more if Alito and Thomas retire during his term. They get to decide if the illegal thing that he did gets to count as an official act. And, it just depends on how corrupt the Supreme Court decides to be on that day. Is it not illegal for Trump to have a crypto coin? Is it not illegal for him to fire, people at the Fed? Is it not illegal for, is it, if the day that he leaves office, if he strangles a puppy on live television, will the Supreme Court decide that that is an official act of president that he cannot be held legally accountable for? Another reason why we should be flooding the government with Democrats, because they can rebalance the Supreme Court so that we don't have this get out of jail free card for every Republican that kisses their ass. Alrighty, Flonk Sauce, happy New Year to you as well. What is the first thing you would suggest for doing the work this new year? It's sometimes hard to know where to start. That is an excellent question, Flonk Sauce. So first thing I would say is, if you go to the link in my bio, I have a link to my Discord, and there is a thread on my Discord called The Work, which is basically just like a bunch of ideas for things that you can do. That includes talking to people in your life who maybe you haven't talked to about politics already, just to make sure that they are living in the same world as the rest of us. You'd be surprised. Even people that you think agree with you politically might have these weird pockets where the propaganda just happened to burrow their way into their noodles, I found out later, after the fact, that I had friends of mine who were, voted for Cuomo over Mamdani. And it's like, oh, I would have loved to have known that beforehand and sat down with them and tried to potentially address some of their issues. I can't guarantee that I would have changed their mind, but at least they would have had that other voice bouncing around in their head. Let's see here. So that's talking to people. Then there's other stuff, the kind of like the big visibility stuff, like strikes and protests and boycott, like join those whenever they come up. Some of it is just finding a good, organization that you don't mind volunteering for or donating your money to. Run for something, Vote Save America, Indivisible. Like, these are excellent organizations that are doing the work right now, and they need people just like you. And your $1 a month can be completely transformative for organizations like that. There are a lot of things that we can do, so we don't have to do things that we hate. Like, if you hate filing, knock on doors. If you can't stand knocking on doors, go file, go Xerox. There's always things that you can do. You just have to do it. And I like putting on that list recruiting other people to do the work, because then that's just less work than for the rest of us that are already doing the work. Alrighty, Han Fixar says, it's amazing how much leftist discourse is just them pretending not to understand things, thus making discourse impossible. Han Fixer Cobham, are you suggesting that leftists like myself use not understanding things as a way of getting out of discourse? Because I don't buy that at all, my guy. Like, I'm out here talking about all these things that I know, and all these things that I understand. Can you give me an example, man? Because that sounds like inaccurate to me. And Muzz King, Triska, Lady Lisa, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. That means we're moving on to finger hearts, everybody. This is the most exciting part of the live stream. We move on to finger hearts. Okie dokie. P1 says, can we get Congress to call his kids and family to explain their crypto wealth? We can if we give Democrats control of the House and the Senate. They'll be able to call hearings and subpoena them. They'll lie, of course, but one battle after another. Let's see here. Leo Roars says can't pardon himself on state charges. States can individually sue him. I believe that's accurate. Leo Roars. Josh says we not talking about politics in the Big 26. Well, maybe you're not, but I am. Lady Lisa says, do you think the Democrats will expand the Supreme Court in 28? I believe that a lot of Democrats have that as a priority right now, but it's always possible that there are just not enough of those Democrats that get elected into office. And so, again, we got to do that work. We got to do that work, Lady Lisa. We got to make sure that people vote for those specific Democrats as opposed to the more wishy-washy centrists who think that it would be untoward to fix the Supreme Court that was broken by the Trump administration. Okay, Han says, ask 100 leftists what leftism is, and you'll get 100 different answers. Thus, if you argue against something, you say it won't work against the 99 of other leftists. I think that that's just a fault of people having different definitions of what these words mean. Like you ask any Republican what it means to be a conservative, and you get a whole bunch of different answers. Han Fixer. I think it's intellectually dishonest to suggest that that is because people on the left like to claim innocence or try to get cover for their beliefs. I think that's just human nature. I think that's just semantics. We don't really all want to spend our lives having semantic arguments. Language is complicated and constantly changing. It's not, it's surfing, like the words are changing, our meanings of the words changing as the culture changes. So yeah, what do you think about that argument? And I'll be honest with you, Han. Depending on how you react to that argument, really depends on how good faith I believe you are in this discussion. Okay, Leo Roar says it's called debating our differences instead of shooting up the other parties. Yeah, I mean, I don't condone any kind of violence. Leo Roars, particularly not political violence. So yeah, not really sure which side of that argument you are taking. Triska, Muzz, Lady Lisa, Pink Love, thank you for helping me reach my fourth gift goal of the day. Finger hearts to the rescue again. Still waiting a response from Han over on Twitch. Somebody whose screen name I can't read because I believe it's in Arabic or something, or Thai or something. Ask me my opinion on communism. It really depends on what your definition of communism is. My definition of communism is employees owning the means of production. So Publix grocery stores, which is employee owned, or Bob's Red Mills, which is employee owned. That to me equals communism, and I like that. But other people have much more, totalitarian views of what communism is, like states seizing all of the every resource, and we all own every resource, and therefore we have a dictatorship of blah blah blah. That's not the communism that I believe in. Okay, retirement planning says, what do you think is a fair tax rate for someone making $1 million a year in income? I'm not really sure what I would set that specific tax rate at. It just has to be more, and it has to be a progressive structure. So, hypothetically, you would be paying 10% on your first million, 20% on your 50th million, 30% on your 100th million, all the way up to 90% on your billionth dollar, something like that. Let's see here. Ammo that thing says your thoughts on NAFO. What's NAFO? It's not a abbreviation I'm familiar with. Leo Roar says we can agree to disagree and still work for all. I agree with that. Leo Roar says I'm saying we do not use violence to discuss differences in our own party. We research too. I'm saying we do not use violence to discuss differences in our own party. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Leo roars. Like, which party are you talking about? Are you talking about one party specifically? Are you saying, that there's more violence within specific political parties? Like, what are we talking about here? Lady Lisa says, before Reagan, wasn't it 60% tax on the wealthy? I believe that's pretty accurate. But I don't have that tax code memorized, unfortunately, so I couldn't tell you where that. What does it mean when somebody is wealthy in Reagan's America? I don't really I don't really know. Leo Roar says, I'm saying that's the difference between Democrats and MAGA. Do you believe that MAGA is more violent than Democrats, or Democrats are more violent than MAGA? Leo Roars, let me know. Okay. All right, Hans, still waiting for your response. Ammo, still waiting for you to tell me what NAFO is. Leo Roar says, yes, every school shooting. I'm not really sure what that means, Leo. Oh, Leo, you're saying that every school shooting is Democrats? Like Democrats do every school shooting? Is that what you're saying, Leo? Ashhole says, is there a line in the sand for MAGA? What do you think that line is? I think it depends on each individual person. There are people who are like, nothing that Trump ever does or says will be bad enough to justify me not worshiping him like a god. And there are other people who dipped during COVID. There are people who are dipping because of the e-files. There are farmers who are probably going to dip because of tariffs. There are veterans who are probably going to dip because of Doge. I think it is a complicated and weird collection of voters out there. Ghostface, I'm still waiting for you to respond to my Second Amendment question from yesterday. Do you think Elon Musk's America Party could become something serious that will determine the next president? I do not. Elon Musk, I do not believe, actually gives a shit about starting a new political party. I think he would do it if it was easy, but I don't think he's going to do it. Leo Roar says every mass shooting and school shooting have been white male Republicans, mostly MAGA. Leo, that tracks with what I believe is the statistical breakdown of school shooters, but I don't know that 100% for a fact. Ghost says I can respond if I can be let up on live via multi-guest, if that's fine with you. Or just let me know. Like, do you remember what I said yesterday about like the Democrats not taking your guns and just having common sense gun control laws? Something like that. Let me know. Carmine says, could billionaires use the Hakimi method to hide their assets from being taxed? I'm not really sure what the Hakimi method is, Carmine. The answer is that they're going to try. And so, it's a moving target. We need to elect the politicians that will not only pass taxes for the wealth, but make sure that they are not skirting those taxes that they just passed using various loopholes. Naomi says, why do you support Trump? I do not. TikTok profile says, leering daycare. I don't know what that means. The white lady who did the daycare fraud in Minnesota is already in jail, so why is this an issue? Richard Chapman says, do you believe that millionaires should pay the national average 21% income tax? I think it should be a progressive tax. So, if you, make $1 million, your $1 million should be taxed more than my $100,000. And if you make $50 million, your $50 million should be taxed more than my millionth dollar, stuff like that. Naomi says, do you support the mass deportations? So I guess, I don't support what ICE is doing, and I don't support Donald Trump. Some people might take that to mean that I don't think that we should be doing any deportations, but that's not the case. If there are people who are here illegally, who are doing crimes, like, we should 100% be deporting them. If we are able to give all of those people due process and deport them in a way that is legal and humane, but exists in such numbers that it becomes mass deportations, like, I'm fine with that. But mass deportations for mass deportation's sake, and throwing away people's human rights and treating people barbarically on purpose. Not only is it not solving the problem, but it just fucking sucks. Like, it is morally, bankrupt. Alrighty, let's see here. Han says, sorry, I had to go AFK for a minute. I missed your response. My response was basically that your argument is, I think, exists on the right as well. That if you ask Republicans what makes somebody Republican, or what is, what are the policies that make you a Republican, you'll get 100 different answers from 100 different people. I think that language is complicated and constantly changing. I think that people often delve really deeply into these semantic arguments about what's a leftist versus what's a progressive versus what's a communist versus what's a Republican versus what's a MAGA Republican. I don't really buy your argument because of that. That was basically what I was saying. Okay, Ilmoth is who Ammo is. Great to see. NAFO is an organization that is pro-NATO invasions. Ilmoth says, aggressive taxing, you sound like a commie. No, progressive taxing. So the more money you make, the more you get taxed. I don't really know what pro-NATO invasions means, I think that we should, the value of NATO has been proven by the fact that Russia has invaded Ukraine for no fucking reason. And so we know that Russia is, acting aggressively to try to rebuild their empire. Ergo, a coalition of countries that band together militarily in order to fight Russian incursions seems pretty valuable. I don't think anybody is arguing for NATO nations to begin annexing or invading other countries. But it's good to see you again, Ilmoth. It's been a minute. I feel like I remember your politics being different based on how these questions are going. Okay, Han, what do you think about that? Candidate says mass deportations are utterly un-American. Yeah, I generally agree with that. Foxtrot Delta Tango says 67 people in here. Well, it's a holiday week. I am Groot. People are probably still hungover from yesterday. I am Groot says, what about those committing crimes against humanity ordering their terroristic Gestapo to just go? I don't really know what you're getting at there. I am Groot. So maybe you want to, I don't know, is there another way that you can fix that comment there? Ghostface says, my response, I'd have to take a look at the state gun laws, but the one I know most is Utah, which I think they should have more limits and restrictions. Okay, so Ghostface, here is the crux of my question back to you. You said that you describe yourself as a centrist as opposed to a Republican or a Democrat. I said, what makes you not want to be a Democrat? You said that you had some conservative ideas, like the Second Amendment, for example. My point that I made yesterday was that the Democratic Party is not anti-Second Amendment. The Democratic Party just believes in having more gun control so that we could potentially have fewer gun deaths in this country. So do you believe that that is too extreme for you to say that you agree with the Democrats' platform on gun control or on the Second Amendment? Do you think that just saying we should have more laws and regulations around gun ownership to do something about all this rampant gun violence, do you think that that's too far and that you need somebody who is less about changing the gun laws than the Democratic Party? That was my main question to you, Ghostface. Let me know. Han says, okay, I have a follow-up then. With the Nick Shirley video exposing the daycare fraud from the Somali community, has basically been ignored by the left, and they just respond with, it is racist, and leftists won't acknowledge it as fraud, just because the people perpetuating it are a black immigrant community, hence my original comment about pretending. Okay, so I have a bunch of things that I would say in response to that. Han, are you still here? I want to make sure that I am not talking to an empty keyboard. I don't want to have to repeat my question again. Make sure that you put a hey or I'm still here in the chat, and I will get to responding to that. Ghostface says, and pro-life, but I know what you're saying. It depends on the state, and state's already there for me to determine whether or not. But generally, currently, I don't see a problem. Okay, happy to hear that, Ghostface. Let's continue this conversation, but I want to respond to Han's thing real quick. So first of all, the Nick Shirley video did not expose daycare fraud in the Somali community. Those videos have been wildly debunked. So that's number one. Let's talk about what actually happened in Minnesota, which is that a white lady hired a bunch of Somali immigrants to help her with her scheme to steal, social welfare money, basically. And she's in jail. She was arrested 3 years ago. She's in jail now. And for some reason, right wing media is trying to make this about Somali immigrants, Tim Walz, and Ilhan Omar. So, you know, I think before we actually start getting into policy or anything, like what should be done about fraud and making sure that people don't steal, taxpayer dollars, we first have to agree with what's going on in Minnesota, right? And there's no leftists, as you say, who are saying that there's no fraud that took place there. We're just saying that the fraud was not perpetuated by Tim Walz or Ilhan Omar or Democrats or the Somali community at large. Like, if the mastermind of the organization is a white lady, why aren't we calling it the white lady Minnesota fraud case? Why are we calling it the Somali fraud case? Oh, let's see here. And then you just put your quote again, Han. Like, could you acknowledge the fact that that you might be getting misinformation, that you might be getting your information from bad sources? Because right now you are not engaging in good faith. The question is not the debate is not you are right and I am wrong. The debate is, oh, we have two different ideas of what's going on in Minnesota right now. How do we square this circle? How do we figure out which one of us is right? The thing that's productive is asking that question, not just assuming you're right and then reposting your quote proving how brilliant you are. Like, we have disagreements. We need to. How do we square the circle, man? How do we agree on what's going on in Minnesota? Is your solution just I'm right and you're wrong and you're an idiot and I'm smart? Like, let me know, Han. Let me know. Okay. Ghostface says, all right, did that one already. Triska says there's an election coming up and the GOP candidate is trying to win dirty. I mean, that's, that. If it's a day that ends in Y, Triska, that is going to be happening. Okay, Ghostface. So, is pro-life the only right wing? If we're getting rid of the Second Amendment, then is pro-life the only Republican-ish or right-wing-ish policy that you hold, that you still hold? Is there other things besides being pro-life that make you not want to call yourself a Democrat? Okay, Ilma says, would you support stopping continuous immigration and instead opt for a method akin to what we had in the past of migration in waves, and then stopping them again, wave after a decade, etc.? Ilmoth, I'm not 100% sure. I do think that there is a better way to deal with immigration than the way that we have been in the past. So I'll tell you what my idea is, and tell me if it trucks with your your policy proposal as well. Let's see here. Yeah, Ghostface still waiting for that response. Where's MAGA's outrage over Trump pardoning the guy that committed $1 billion in Medicare fraud? Yeah, where is it indeed? Okay, so Ghostface, I was doing that. Ilma says, you are sounding very red hat typish right now. Haha. I am? I don't think that is accurate at all, Ilmoth. Okay, so here's my thing about immigration, okay? First of all, we need to recognize that immigrants are net positive in this country. They commit crimes at lower rates than naturalized citizens. They are doing jobs that we don't want to do. And we are suffering from population decline right now in America. So in order to fill jobs and pay various government organizations with tax dollars, we need more bodies, and immigrants represent the bodies that we are not giving birth to. That's number one. Number two is, but sometimes people don't like it when immigrants are, trucking through their backyards en masse if they live in a border town. People don't like people coming here without having a passport or us having any record of it. Illegal border crossings, they are chaos. They are instability. So how do we deal with that? Obviously, border security. That is something that the Democratic Party has always funded, so it's not like we're anti-border security. Number two is we need to have good relationships with borders south of us, with countries south of the border, so that we can potentially try to address the root causes of immigration. If we can stop that civil war, if we can defang that cartel, then maybe all of these people are not going to feel like they have to come to America to survive or have a better life for their children. That's number two. Number three is to actually incentivize people to come in the right way by making it not a decades long, tens of thousands of dollars process. So that means hiring immigration judges and asylum judges to actually process all of these cases. The Trump administration has done the opposite of all of those things and instead has just opted for cruelty and illegal seizures and deportations. Right. Lady Lisa says immigrants help our economy by paying taxes that they can't collect. That is accurate. Mel says, "Hey Jared, Happy New Year. Happy New Year too. Have you tuned into the Jack Smith interview on YouTube?" So I haven't seen the full interview. I saw some clips, and Jack Smith is he's an assassin. He's a fucking sniper. He's SEAL Team 6. He had the fucking case. He was ready to roll. It would have been a fucking slam dunk, and it was just the Supreme Court and the Republican Party and the billionaire class that stopped it. Trump was dead to rights. He was guilty as hell, guilty as sin. He would be in jail right now were it not for billionaire propaganda, electoral systems that favor Republicans, information systems that favor Republicans, etc. Alrighty. Amos says Red Hat is in commie, not MAGA. My bad. LOL. Yeah, I guess I would say, Ilmoth, that a moth that thinks. That makes more sense. I guess my response to that would be, I don't think so. I don't think that my extremely mild attitude towards immigration represents any kind of like communist ideology. I challenge your definition of what communism is. All right, let's see here. Candidate for Leith says, "Is Putin Trump's boss?" We don't know if Trump actually is a Russian agent or not. All we know is that if he was, he would be doing exactly what he is currently doing. It makes a little bit more sense that he would be an agent of the Chinese government, because what Trump has basically done is, kneecapped our own military and economy, leaving China the ability to accelerate their economy and dominance over the globe and military. So, the Trump really is the make China greater than everybody else party, as opposed to make America great again. And Ashhole, Muzzking, Triska, Richard, thank you so much for helping me reach my 5th gift goal of the day. And we are almost at an hour, so we are going to be wrapping up pretty soon. Get in your final questions. Han, still waiting for your response. Doesn't really seem like you're here in good faith again, if you're just going to ignore all of my comments in favor of just calling me an idiot. SNL says, "What do you think about Israel?" Same thing I think about every country. The people that are living there should be able to live there because they have roots and families and shit. But the government of Israel, that's a different story. Netanyahu is a far-right psychopath who is doing war crimes against the people of Palestine and is perpetuating a genocide against the people of Palestine. We should not be sending them any more money and weapons because we already have a law that says that we're not allowed to do that for countries that are guilty of war crimes and genocide. Bitnevo says, "Jared, it feels like Putin, Trump, and Xi are all synchronizing conquest. Could they all be in on it?" Potentially. I think that there's like a thin coalition of dictators. Like, Putin existing helps Trump be a better dictator and vice versa. And so I think that they generally understand the value of each other existing. I don't know if they are coordinating on a molecular level. Like, they have very specific things that they are doing to specifically make themselves more powerful and dominate the globe. But they also kind of like back off of certain things and get involved in other things if it kind of like helps the general atmosphere of the globe being pro, Nazi and shit like that. Amath says, you deflected and rambled a bit. I asked about stopping continuous immigration and instead opting for waves, like 1 million after 10 years or so. Also, call me for wanting further tax laws, not migration. Yeah, I guess I would just encourage you, Ilmoth, to dip out of that definition of communist that you have. I don't think it's accurate to my political beliefs. Because here's what I don't want to happen, Ilmoth. What I don't want to happen is this kind of like circular conversation that happens between people on the left and people on the right, where people on the left will say, I want universal health care, and then people on the right will say, but that's communist. And then I say, I don't think that is communist. That's just what they have in, Norway and Sweden and shit like that. And then you go, but they're not communists. And then I go, yeah, I just want their universal health care. And then you go, but that's communist. And I go, okay, well, I'm a communist then. And then you go, oh, so that means that you're for the government stealing all the things that you have, and you want to have a country like Russia and Cuba. And I'm like, no, that's not what I want. I just want the healthcare part of it. Do you see what I'm saying, man? It's like you're demanding that I am a communist, and I am just telling you I want a progressive tax code. Ready. Or Ski Bum says, what's your thoughts on the Minnesota fraud case? Will there be more in other states? There already are others in other states. But there's not like a coordinated, fraud network. The white lady that did the Minnesota fraud is already in jail. She was arrested 3 years ago. A Mayor Asian boy says, do you think communism could ever be successful? It already is successful. The way that I define communism is employees owning the means of production. So any company that is employee-owned is communist, and employee-owned companies do great. There you go. Alrighty. Brian Dorau says, Trump's a dictator, and then a bunch of laughing faces. The laughing faces make me think, Brian, that you do not agree that Trump is trying to be a dictator. And so I guess I would ask you, are you open to hearing the case that Trump is trying to be a dictator? Okay, Uncle Hippie says, do you think the U.S. should fund research into AI deciphering of whale and dolphin languages? It sounds interesting, I don't know if it's a priority, but it definitely sounds interesting. Dead City Ranger says, no wing is good. I disagree. I'm left-wing. I think left-wing is great. Brian says, and we're supposed to believe somebody on TikTok. Come on. I mean, you don't have to believe me. You can just, give it a Google and double-check the things that I'm saying, my guy. I do not have a monopoly on accuracy. Okay. All right, everybody, we're going to get out of here. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can buy things from my store. You can send gifts on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube, and you become subscribers and super fans. If you're an Amazon Prime member and you subscribe to my Twitch channel, it costs you $0, but I get $2. I think that's a pretty good, cool, free way to help support the show. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, DMs are open. You can hit me up through my Discord. You can email me through my website. I want to be a resource for you guys. So if I can do that, if I can help you be more informed and involved in politics, I want to do that. So use me as a resource. Use me and abuse me. Use me until I am all used up. I love the Discord because in addition to being a way to get in touch, you can also form community there. And there are great recommendations there for books and podcasts and also organizations for you to donate your time and money to. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Schedule is regularly updated on my TikTok, on my and on my Twitch and on my personal website. Special thanks to my Twitch subscribers, Triska, Lauren, and Kayslo. Special thanks to my TikTok superfans, Susie, Sean, Dean, and Hot Sauce. And special thanks to Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. My patrons, I promise you my garden thought is coming. It might be a little late today because I was gardening last night. Alrighty, Happy New Year to you too, RK. Mary Stark says, I hope not rude, but your baby is due in May, so how is the missus doing? She's doing okay. There's good times and bad times based on how comfortable she is, but so far, everybody's healthy. Everything is looking good. ATM. Mm-mm-mm. All right, everybody. We are out of here. Hold on a second. I got 2 more comments on YouTube. Josh says you can watch him on YouTube or Twitch. You don't have to believe some guy on TikTok. That's very funny, Josh. All right. Amoth says I'm independent, not right or left, and call me because now tax laws, then unions, then end of private equity. It's so obvious of going socialist, then commie. Are you intentionally being obtuse? I thought we were buddies, Ilmoth. Why are you coming at me with this heat, my guy? I don't think that taxes and unions are a slippery slope to the end of private equity. You know, like we have had progressive tax structures in this country, and we have had very strong unions and continue to have very strong unions here in America, and we have not slid into full communist dictatorship. You know, so yeah, I don't really believe it. You say it's so obvious. I don't think that that's accurate. You know, you say it's so obvious, but I don't even think it's true. You know, so that's the opposite of obvious. Yeah, man. Can we take the temperature down a little bit, Ilmoth? I thought we were buddies. Why are you bringing this smoke to my channel? All right. Well, that's not the best note to leave things on, but that was my last question. Scott Helflingler says, is Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania under investigation for fraud by whistleblowers in the state police? I haven't heard anything about that, Scott. And I would take everything negative that I hear about potential 2028 contenders with a massive grain of salt, because the Republican media machine is always going after their hypothetical enemies. So, you know, do a little bit more research before you start casting aspersions on a Shapiro or Bashir. All right, everybody, do the work. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye.